there ready to step up and do your part as we come together to uplift our motherland. I took office 2.5 years ago as a dumb, ignorant family physician coming from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I had no idea what I was going to be doing in Washington. As a matter of fact, I actually felt kind of funny and silly, thinking me, a medical doctor, can be a diplomat. But be it as it may, singularly, the one thing, I came here, by the way, with no plans of staying. I was coming here, top 6 months. After 6 months, look at my husband, honey, I tried, it didn't work out. Look at the chairman of the African Union who had appointed me. Thank you, Madam Zuma, it was great, but I could not do it. But 5th month into this position, one issue that kept coming to me and became very apparent was the disrespect for the African. I knew it existed, I just didn't understand the depth and the profoundness of it. And not only that, as I began to understand it even deeper, I began to also understand its economic implications when it comes to how we are perceived on the world stage, how this simple fact of simply disrespecting the African had serious implications and is at the root cause of why Africa is not able to move forward. And as I went and tried to understand and dig further to say, what is it about us as black people around the globe? Why is it that we are so disrespected no matter where you go? And I often say, was there a memo sent out to say wherever you go, if you are not a black person, you see a black person, you're automatically superior to them, and you have a right to disrespect them? This memo did not miss anybody. It went to non-black people, but here's the real shocker. It also went to us black people to say, accept that you are inferior. You automatically take an inferior position. And I'm going to have to tell you something that has become a realization that and this is where I am stuck as I try to understand, how did this message just go through and percolated so through? Now we are on automatic pilot. It's almost as if we had undergone a genetic mutation. We don't even have to be told. We pass it on to our children. Have you ever wondered, of all the colors on earth, why were 2 colors chosen? Black color and white color. Follow me on this one. You take a white color, you associate it with Jesus Christ. You associate it with the angels. You associate it with purity and everything wonderful and everything desirable. And then you take a race that's not even white and you say you are white. Yes. And then you take another color. You associate it with the devil. You associate it with everything undesirable. I've never seen a bank robber wearing a white mask. All the villains on movies are black. Everything undesirable is black. And then you take another race that are not even black and say, you guys, you are black. Yeah. Now go at it.
Speak, my sister.
As we black mothers are trying to raise our children in our own homes, as much as we try to tell them that you're black and you're beautiful, guess what? The minute they step outside the door, the messages are completely different. A barrage of subliminal messages telling our children that that which you represent is horrible. How do we fight against that? How do I tell my granddaughter that you're black and beautiful, but the world tells her otherwise? The voices echoing her blackness as a symbol of everything undesirable are much, much louder than even we black mothers, we come together, we can never drown those subliminal messages. They were all by design. Let me take you to the beginning. Certainly for Africa, your continent. Because as we gather here today, as we try to strategize, as we try to create those linkages between those Africans away from the continent and the Africans on the continent, we must understand, how did we get here? And for Africa, it starts with that monumental decision when the colonizers, came together in Berlin in 1884. And let me say, prior to 1884, they were coming to Africa in a haphazard way. They had started started with slavery. And then when they felt like they needed the slaves to stay on the continent, they say, oh, we no longer believe in slave trade. Let's stop it. No. It was really just another way of saying the labor is needed on the continent. Let's keep the monkeys on the continent so we can continue to exploit them. So 1884, they met in Berlin to organize themselves so they can effectively loot from the monkeys. They did not meet in Berlin to see to it that Africa would prosper. No. Let me repeat. The colonizers met in order to see to it that your Africa, our Africa, and her children, not only on the continent, are forever defeated and dominated. That was 135 years ago. The manner in which they did it, they took out the map of Africa while the Africans were sleeping, minding their own business. Started to chop up your continent into the tiny little countries that we see today. The bigger and more powerful a kingdom was, the more countries that came out of it. Not only more countries, but these countries were given to different colonizers who spoke different languages. Let me bring it home for a second. Pretend you're driving from Zambia. You're speaking English. Pretty soon you're in Angola. You're speaking Portuguese. Then DRC, French. Equatorial Guinea, Spanish. Southern Cameroon, French. Northern Cameroon, Southern Cameroon, English. Northern Cameroon, French. You are now in Nigeria, English. Hello. These were the same people. Prior to 1884, we were powerful, amazing kingdoms with well-established educational and religious systems. If the truth be told, we had the civilization. We were the civilized. They were the devils, the uncivilized ones. They set out to take everything that symbolized civilization in Africa. To this day, they're still refusing to give up those relics. If those relics were not that good, why are you keeping them? We were way ahead of them in our civilization. They set out to destroy us. And Berlin Conference put the nail on that coffin. So they gave Djibouti the same sovereignty as the United States. They gave Burundi the same sovereignty as China. They gave Togo. You see, the EU realizes individual little countries, they can't survive on the world stage. So they come together as the European Union. Now picture this now. So they cut up this Africa into the tiny little countries, small economies that could never survive on their own, but gave them the same sovereignty as the big boys. So that way, when the little bitty countries go to the world stage for the purposes of development and discussing trade, they're wannabe boxers who are being thrown into the heavyweight boxing ring every day. How do you put China in the same boxing ring with Eswatini? Eswatini has 1.2 million people. China has 1.4 billion people. And you put them on the same stage and say, go at it, negotiate. Are you with me? Yes. This is insanity of the highest order. How have we allowed this carnage to go on? When Eswatini is thrown in the same boxing ring with China and Eswatini collapses before Eswatini even gets on the stage, the world says, well, Eswatini, what's wrong with you? Why can't you take care of your people? Well, China came in and said, Eswatini, give me all your gold or else. And if Eswatini does not agree, they just go on next door to Lesotho and give Lesotho an extra $1. And if Lesotho doesn't take it, they just jump on to Togo, Central African Republic. It was all by design. 1884. They did something else in addition to chopping us up. they also set out to make the African believe that everything African was bad and undesirable, and everything Western, particularly French and British, was more desirable. We call that the legacy of colonization. Prior to that, they had started long working on the slaves. Make them think everything about them, forget anything about Africa. Where you come from is a horrible place, diseased and dying people, constantly at war with themselves, uncivilized. Cut out any communications with them. You need to just know what we tell you. And we call that the legacy of slavery. So that's where you look at where we are today. 135 years later, a system that was put in place to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated, that Africa is forever exploited, remains in place today, alive and well. And we sit here and we ask ourselves, why isn't Africa moving forward? Why does Africa continue to be taken advantage of? Well, I'll tell you why, very simply. Until Africa comes together as a continent speaking with one voice, one continent, one people, nothing, and I repeat, nothing is gonna change. As individual little African countries, we are wannabe boxers. We will never make it fighting against the heavyweights. We must speak with one voice. Yes. And this is exactly what our Pan-African leaders wanted to see happen in 1963 when they came together in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. They clearly stated that Africa for the Africans at home and abroad, and that African Union was now. They said Africa must speak with one voice. It is the only way for Africa to take its rightful place on the world stage. Sadly, when they went to Addis Ababa in 1963, they were divided. We had two factions, the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group. The Casablanca group were saying Africa for the Africans at home and abroad, and African Union now. This was Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. Only 7. The other 25 of the 32 who attended were the Monrovia group. They were the nationalists. They said, let's go slow. Let's kind of wait on this Pan-African thing. 55 years later, 56 this year, we're still going slow. As if it wasn't bad enough that we were divided up into the tiny little countries that we are today. The gift that Berlin Conference gave us. One other thing that France did between 1958 and 1961 in the name of giving us our independence as African countries. France forced the Francophone, and I hate that terminology. There is no such thing as Francophone, Anglophone. They made it up. But for the purposes of communication, I will use that. 14 of those countries, they said, in order for you to get your independence from us, you must sign this document. You thought they could have found a better name for the document. The document was called the Pact for the Continuation. I repeat, the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. We are talking about giving you independence, but sign this pact for the continuation of colonization in a different format. And I'm going to highlight some of those issues that they said you must agree to if you are going to be independent. Hello. Maybe we need to redefine the meaning of independence for the French. First, France said, you see, you monkeys, you don't know how to manage your money. We're going to demand that you deposit 85% of your bank reserves with the French Minister of Finance. Under the French Central Bank, under the control of the French Minister of Finance. France is then going to take your 85% bank deposits from each and every one of you. Deposit those funds in the French stock market under the French name. And you may or may not know the returns. Today, as we speak, the latest figures are saying for every 14 billion that France invests in the stock market from Africa, they are realizing upwards of 300 billion in return. Every year in, year out, because of these deposits from the African countries, France is taking out of Africa over $500 billion. Now figure it out. For every 14 billion, the returns on the investment are over 300 billion, and they are taking over 500 billion. So in actuality, France is taking out of Africa trillions of dollars year in and year out from us poor people, Africans. Back to the pact. So should you want to access some of your money that you have deposited with France, you have to submit your country's financial returns. And if approved, you get to get it as a loan. You can only access up to 20% of your money year in, year out as a loan at commercial interest rates. Your own money. As if that was not enough. They said all your minerals discovered, yet to be discovered, all your oil discovered, yet to be discovered. France and French companies have the first right of refusal. If there's anything left over that the French companies do not want, your people might have. To this day. They said you will only use the currency that we created for you because you're special Africans. We call it the CFA. There was the Central African CFA and the Western African CFA, same animal. And that France is the only one that can print it for you. 1958. Fast forward. They're still printing it for us. And if you start misbehaving, they just stop printing your money. And your country's in trouble. They also said your language of instruction shall be French, whether you like it or not. That France will have military presence in your country, that your military can only be trained by France, that you can only buy military equipment from France, that you cannot have any military alliance with your neighbor, and that in the event of war, your allegiance is only to France. And furthermore, because they have military presence in your country, they can invade you without notice should they feel that the interests of France in your country are being violated.
Teach, sister, teach. Speak on, sister.
Fast forward, 2019, nothing has changed. The same people who have the audacity to tell us that we are poor countries, they are taking trillions out of Africa every year. And what is the African doing? Like an obedient, programmed black man, we just give in. We know the facts, but we just do nothing about it. Now, you have to say some of the fears are real, because if France that has sold you inferior equipment to theirs, France that has trained your military to be inferior to their military, they are now in your country. They can invade you. They have the permission to do so. They can destabilize you. And then one might say, why is it that African leaders haven't done anything about this deplorable situation? Well, let me tell you, my brother and sister, they have tried. Documented to this day, 22 coups where leaders were assassinated. France had something to do with it. The first 7, when they decided they were pulling out of the CFA and that they're going to print their own money, they were assassinated. Every time an African leader has tried to do what's best for their country, they were assassinated. Majority of them aided by France. It's a known fact. And then others, they were just mercenaries who felt that when there was a natural resource discovered in one country, they wanted to create a coup. So while the country is thrown into a civil war, they're siphoning the natural resource.
Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing fine. Now, I know most of you might have not known this lady before this video. Now, her name is Dr. Arikana. She comes from Zimbabwe, and she worked as she represented Zimbabwe in the United States as its ambassador to that country. Now, Dr. Arikana admits that when she was being given the job to represent Zimbabwe, she thought it was going to be an easy one because she has been so delusional. She has been living in her own world that the white, or let me say the Western countries, those who colonized us, those who continue colonizing the black countries, do have good interest for Africa, and I mean the motherland and the Caribbean and every other black country in the world. But she admits she has been wrong all this time, because none of these people, none of these organizations care about black countries. None of them has even ever stepped up to the best interest of these countries. They all do businesses with this country, and when the business collapse, or when you are too bright, or when you become so inquisitive and they can't eliminate you, what do? They leave you alone, they desert you, and they make sure you regret and have the consequences of your own actions because of going against them. Now, can we just talk about this? I know most of our people have been brainwashed. I'm a black guy from Africa, and I live in Africa. I know how much Africans have been brainwashed. Now, you go to talk to Africa, and they'll tell you, you know what? The angel is a white guy. All angels are painted to be white, and all black people are doomed, and they have the darkest representations in the world. Now, let's talk. Perhaps the devil, the Satan, is always with horns, protruding teeth, then black. But they'll always say how black is beautiful, how this is this, but they don't speak their actions. Now, they don't speak their words. Now, let me tell you something. If you are a Christian, you are going to agree with me that the Bible says at some point, faith without actions is dead. If you speak the words that you don't do, it is nothing, absolutely nothing. If you speak something you can't help, it is nothing. It's like wasting your time. Now, I've been here. I'm 23 years old, turning 24 years, but I can see the rot in our countries. I can see the rot in the leadership of our continent. She talks sense, but some people are still brainwashed. They still worship the same oppressor. They still bow down to their policies, to the IMF, to the NATO, to all these countries, to all these organizations that have made sure Africa remains poor. Those are not my direct words. Those are words from Dr. Arikana. And if you are a very good fan of Pilo Lumumba, Professor Pilo Lumumba, he says the same thing. These are the great Pan-Africanists we are remaining with. Now, we all know all these people that we had, the good people that we had, the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, are no longer there. All these great men from Africa no longer exist. Marcus Garvey are no longer there. So we must have a new generation that stands for whatever is rightfully ours. We've been manipulated for the longest time. We've been brainwashed. Our kids have been brainwashed. Look at the syllabuses that we learn in Africa. 60% they talk about the white man. They don't discuss matters regarding our own country and culture. My own syllabus in my own country, I was doing a research. It is 10%. It talks about my country, 10%. About the culture of my country, 10%. Imagine 10% out of 100%. And it discusses Europe and outside world, almost 60%. It discusses Africa, 15%. Then my locality, 4%. Now, what kind of education? It is time we start learning our own things. Let's learn our own history. That's why our kids are messing so badly. That's why we, the generation Z, are messing so badly. That's why so many people have been messed. Now look at our parents. They were so much brainwashed. Go talk to my parent, go talk to your grandma, and let him tell you the perspective, or let her tell you the perspective of whatever he has. He will tell you Jesus is white, angels is white, then black is always associated with dark things. Now, I'm not here to divide anyone. I'm here to synthesize on whatever Dr. Arikana is saying. If we don't unite today, brothers and sisters, we are going to perish. If we allow the division that is being brought to us by these foreign powers, we are going to mess big time. We've always known that our unity, our strength is whatever we can anchor our courage in. If we do not speak truth to power, we are going to perish. If we continue divided the way they want us, we are not going to live. We are not going to survive a single day. You see how much Europe is united? You see how much they are united? You see how much they care about themselves? Now, go look at the International Security Council. Come and tell me if there is a single representative from Africa. There are 5 countries. None of them comes from Africa. Now, they tell you Africa is a key player in the global economy, of which it's true. But they recognize that after taking everything we have, after we press them to the wall, that's when they actually accept that. They don't even accept, they pretend it. But did you know what? Africa plays around 60% of the economy of the world. Our mineral resources, our labor, our minds, the wisdom God gave us, it's whatever they are using in their countries. Go look at how many surgeons are in the US who are black. Go look how many engineers are in Europe who are black. They have brainstormed us, they have brainwashed us, and now it has come to brain drain. They want to make sure we have no clear mind. We have no one left who can talk to the African continent. It is time we rise up, Africa. It's time we stop dividing ourselves. They put boundaries because they knew our unity was their biggest enemy. So if we divide ourselves today, it will be their strongest weapon against us, division. If we unite ourselves today, we are going to win this battle. Believe me not, they knew it. Why divide Africa into so many countries, into 55 countries? Why? Why don't you just leave Africans to live the way they were before 1876? Why? Why did they do this? Because they knew ruling these people with one mind, with one voice, with the unity they have, we can't manage. Let's divide, let's put boundaries. Now, go to Europe. A single visa can take you to 30 countries, or at least 15 countries. Come to Africa, 55 countries with 55 visas that you need. Not even the neighbors of each country. You can't move to the neighboring country because it is so much restricted. The borders do not allow you. You'll be deported or taken to prison for crossing boundaries. But go to their countries. They are united. This is whatever we are saying. We must speak truth to power. I thank Dr. Arikana. Jamaicans wake up. Africa wake up. The Caribbean wake up. It is time. Let's rise to power. Thank you so much. Have a good day.